Welcome to another loop lesson, this time on the break and continue statements and how you can use them to get out of the difficult bind. If you want to follow along, then please use the links which will be down below, and you can use the interactive screencast software on Scrimba to get your hands coding. So good luck and get to it. Welcome back to my household. My daughter is getting dressed, but she needs to work through the pile of clothes in front of her. Write a for loop to log putting on and then the item name for each of the items in the clothes array. Pause the screencast and press play when you've finished. So we can accomplish this with a simple for loop. We initialize I with the value of 0. Our loop will keep running for as long as I is less than the length of the clothes array, and then we increment I. We want to log putting on and then the item name. So I'll do that with a template string. So let's run that code. We can see in the console that we've logged putting on and then each of the items in our array. But we want to manipulate this loop. We don't want to put on our shoes before we've put on our shirt and our shorts. So we're going to use the continue statement here. Now, what the continue statement does is it skips over the current item in the loop, and you can read more about it here. So let me add to our challenge. Let's see if you can update our loop so that if the current item is shoes, that it skips over that item and does not log it to the console. I'll give you a moment to do that. So let's update our loop. If the current item is shoes, then continue. Let's run our code. And we can see that we have skipped over the shoes, but we've continued through to the rest of the array. Now, I also notice that there is a dirty shirt, but we can't just skip that. We can't go shirtless. So what happens is if we encounter the dirty shirt, we're going to have to go and get a clean one. That means we need to break out of our loop. So now I want you to use the break statement in the same way that you use the continue statement. Let me add one last element to our challenge. Now it's your turn. So I'm going to update our loop here. Here I'm saying if the current clothes item includes the string dirty, then break out of the loop. Let's run that code again. Now we can see we've put on our underwear, we've put on our socks, we've skipped over our shoes, but our shirt is dirty and we've broken out of our loop. Oh well, maybe we'll get dressed tomorrow. Right, now that you have the break and continue statements under your belt, let's move into our loop garden where we can put them to use. See you there. So we find ourselves here again, back in our loop garden. And this time we're going to test out our newly acquired skills of using the break and continue statements. So let's take a look. You can see our garden here has each of the plots sown with seeds, but these plots need watering. First things first, some of our plots have already been watered and one of them contains weeds. So the first part of this challenge is for you to open the HTML and to add the class of watered to some of the plots and to add the class of weeds to one of the plots. Then, back in the JavaScript, I want you to create a loop to water the rest of the plots. What you'll need to do inside this loop is check if the plot has already been watered. If it has already been watered, skip over it. If the plot contains weeds, then exit the loop. And if neither of these conditions is true, then add a class of water to the plot. When you've completed the challenge, you'll end up with a garden that looks a little bit like this. Here are the plots that we have added the class of water to. This plot here has already been watered previously, so we skipped over it. And you can see here that there are some weeds. So we've exited the loop because we need to deal with these weeds before we can continue watering the rest of the plots. You have everything you need to complete this challenge. Let's meet back here once our garden has been watered and we'll check in and see how you've done. So the first part of our challenge was to add the class of watered to one or more of the divs and the class of weeds to one of the divs. So we're going to do that now. Now I'm going to choose a plot to plant some weeds in. Let's take a look. We can now see that we have some plots that have been previously watered and we have one plot that is growing weeds. Let's go to the next part of our challenge. The first thing we need to do is to create an array to contain each div with a class of plot. Now I'm going to loop through my array of plots, and I'll do that with a for loop. Inside this loop, the first thing I'm going to do is water each of the plots indiscriminately. So I'm going to select the plots at the current plot and add a class of water to the class list. Let's save that and see what we have. In our mini browser, you can see that we've watered each of the plots, but we didn't want to water those plots which had previously been watered, and we wanted to exit the loop when we encountered the weeds. So we need to update our loop statement. Let's deal with the plots that have already been watered first. Here I'm saying if the current plot already contains the class of watered in its class list, then skip over using the continue statement. Note that we don't need to wrap our water action in an else clause because the continue statement breaks out of the current loop. Now we need to deal with the weeds. Let's save our work and check it in our garden. Here you can see we have watered plots 1 and 2. We've skipped over plot 3 and continued watering, skipping over those plots that have already received some water. And then we've encountered our weeds and we have exited the loop. Okay, gardener, it looks like you have some weeding to do. Once you've done that, join me in the next scrim where we can learn about some more loops.